In the early 20th century, Georgia, South Ossetia and Abkhazia were provinces of Russia. The territory of Abkhazia was in the Sukhum district, while the territory of what is today South Ossetia was in the government of Tiflis. After the disintegration of the Russian Empire in 1917, Georgia left Russia, but Abkhazia and South Ossetia refused to join the newly emerged Georgian Democratic Republic.
Georgia declared its independence and decided to leave with Ossetia and Abkhazia. Like now, our ancestors, our grandfathers and fathers told Georgia, no, we had never been with Georgia, we had never been in Georgia, and Georgia started a war. South Ossetia was razed to the ground. 40,000 people became refugees, and more than 5,500 were slaughtered.
In 1921, Georgia joined the USSR. Soon Joseph Stalin emerged as the supreme ruler. Stalin is the alias of Joseph Jugashvili, an ethnic Georgian and a native of the town of Gori in Georgia. As soon as he was established, his Georgian compatriots increasingly urged him to annex ever new lands to Georgia.
My close scrutiny convinced me that merging North and South Ossetia into an autonomous republic within Georgia could be agreed on. I'm writing about all this in my private capacity. Report the Territorial Committee's view.
Stalin wrote this to Anastas Mikoyan, the top party chief in the Caucasus. It was clear to him that Ossetia, historically divided into northern and southern parts by the Caucasian Ridge, needed an administrative unification. Mikoyan sought to convince Stalin that unifying Ossetia within the Georgian framework wouldn't be bloodless, considering the recent ethnic clashes.
And my father replied to him 13 days later that, from the point of view of the nationalities question, unification will be expedient for Ossetia, but the inclusion of a united Ossetia into Georgia is endangering the established inter-ethnic relations.
As a result, Stalin settled for what he thought was a compromise, but in reality it was a time bomb that exploded many years later. South Ossetia was recognized as an autonomous region within Georgia, with its capital in Tskhinval. North Ossetia, with its capital in Vladikavkaz, remained in the Russian Federation. Right after that, Ossetians started to migrate from the southern territories.
The first Soviet census, held in the mid-1920s, came up with these statistics. Both North and South Ossetias had approximately equal populations, 105,000 here in South Ossetia, and some 115,000 Ossetians up north, on the other side of the Caucasian Ridge. But according to the 1979 data, 600,000 persons lived in North Ossetia and 94,000 in South Ossetia.
The situation was similar in Abkhazia. Originally, both Abkhazia and Georgia joined the USSR with equal rights as constituent republics, but things changed within Stalin's advent to power.
There was a plan conceived by Vladimir Lenin, the founder of the USSR. According to that plan, all peoples were due to receive equal status. And there was Stalin's autonomization plan, which meant absorption of smaller peoples by bigger ones. And it was this plan that was put into practice when Abkhazia, without consultation with its people, was included in the Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic as an autonomy in 1931.
Both South Ossetia and Abkhazia became Georgian colonies. Soon language discrimination started to be practiced. In 1939, the basically Latin Ossetian alphabet was converted to Georgian script, and teaching in Georgian was introduced at Ossetian schools. The same fate befell Abkhazia.
We remember well the time when the Abkhazian language as such was being banned at school. Abkhazian schools were closed one after another. Nothing was published in Abkhazian. Every 10 years, the Abkhazian intelligentsia, politicians, scientists and others raised their voice in defense of their ethnic uniqueness and their language, and they urged a withdrawal from Georgia.
The village of Lukhny, Gudayuta district in Abkhazia. In In the Soviet period, this green was a scene of periodic protests against the nationalities policy that the Georgian Republic was pursuing in respect of its Abkhazian autonomy.
The demands were concrete. Our republic should join Russia. Because we and the Georgians are different people from time immemorial. Our language is a most ancient one. We have customs and traditions of our own. And our ancestors were defending their homeland for centuries. People were saying openly that the Abkhazian people were being exposed to genocide.
This documentary was made in the USSR in 1941. It shows how, on Stalin's initiative, ethnic Georgian families were moving en masse from Georgia to rural areas of Abkhazia.
The collective farmer Cheladze and family moved to new lands. Do you like the house, son?
These people immediately received housing and jobs. Little by little, the ethnic Georgians acquired a numerical edge over the native Abkhazian population.
This construction project took into account the resettlement. The aim was to create enclaves, to cut Abkhazian villages, to establish Georgian settlements between them.
The Abkhazian population dwindled as time went by. Simultaneously, the Soviet propaganda was lauding the friendship of the peoples and the man who had masterminded the change.
The Abkhazian people are singing their song cheerfully about the maker of a joyful life, the great and dear Stalin.
The Georgian resettlement to the Abkhazian territories and the process of job creation continued even during the Second World War.
In Stalin's time, there was a plan to banish the Abkhazians, like many other Caucasian peoples had been banished. A similar plan existed, and eyewitnesses say a lot of freight cars were made ready. But later, the plan was cancelled after all, because it was feared the Georgians wouldn't be able to ethnically reclaim the territories.
The late 1980s, the collapse of the Soviet Union was a stone's throw away. Georgia was among the first to urge a withdrawal from the Soviet Union. After a former dissident, Zviad Gamsakhurdia, made it to the top, the nationalist call Georgia for the Georgians was repeated again and again.
For example, one of the Georgian parties, a very mild social democratic affair, was suggesting that the non-Georgian birth rate should be legislatively restricted to 2 children in the Georgian territory. The term itself, non-Georgian, is very interesting too. It reminds one of the notorious Nazi term Untermensch, subhuman.
Tofik Karzania is a taxi driver from Sukron. He has often witnessed nationalist outrages. Even on an everyday level, the Abkhazians were given to understand they were second-rate people.
They always resented that we didn't speak Georgian or sign up as Georgians. I mean, ethnic origin box in official papers. I've been a taxi driver for 19 years. There were numerous cases. One day in the evening I have a passenger who says hello in Georgian. I did the same, but in Russian. He said again, I said hi in a human language, and you reply to me in a pig language.
To counter the rising tide of nationalism